Hello, and thank you for joining us for Sober Thursdays. Today is our final panel discussion as we wrap up Alcohol Awareness Month. And what we're talking about today is sober and social. It's a question that people often ask. What happens when you're in sobriety? Can you be sober and social? Well, we're going to be talking about it today as Sober Thursdays starts now. I'm excited to have a great panel joining me today to talk about this topic of sober and social. It's something that, as I mentioned earlier, that people often wonder if it's possible. And we have a great group of panelists here today that are all in recovery. They're representing a wide range of people who are at our facilities across the country, and some boots on the ground. We have Michael Kimball. He's an outreach coordinator, boots on the ground there in Florida. We have Danielle Smith. She's an outreach coordinator, boots on the ground as well in Missouri. We have Nicole Wolf, who's worked in several places within our company, but right now is in Kentucky. And then we have Tyler Bell, who is an admissions navigator. He's one of those people that answers the phone when people are calling in for help, and he's based there at our corporate office. So welcome our panelists today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Yeah, great. So first I want to just start off so we can get some kind of understanding where everyone is in their recovery journey. So Michael, I'm going to start with you. Let's just start off talking about how many years you've had in sobriety.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Very happy to be here. I have 6 years, a little bit more than that, but not quite the 6.5. And it's been the best 6 years of my life.
Love it. Okay, Danielle.
I am grateful to have today 1,026 days, which puts me just shy of 3 years.
Wow. So today is a powerful day for you?
It's just one. I mean, for me, I count. Every day I have a whiteboard in my bathroom. So every morning when I get up, I change it. It reminds me of how far I've come and what I don't want to give up.
I love that. So in your bathroom, you have a whiteboard where you're keeping track day by day. I love that. Okay, Nicole, how many years are you celebrating?
I celebrated 10 years in January.
Congratulations. Congratulations. And finally, Tyler, where are you at in your process?
And I celebrated 8 years in February on Valentine's Day, actually.
Okay, I love that. So look, we have a panel, for anyone who's tuning in, this is a panel that has been in recovery for a while. We have Nicole, 10 years, we have Danielle, 3 years, Michael, 6. So we have a wide range of just expertise in dealing with this and telling what life is really like. So let's get straight into the conversation. So one of the biggest things that people ask is, can you have a true social life in recovery? Danielle, I'm going to let you take that first question. And I'm sure you hear it a lot because that's one of the reasons why people sometimes are hesitant to go to treatment.
I had this conversation last night with a young woman and her family. And I think that I love to answer it because I asked myself the same question. I thought, can I be fun without alcohol? And we see it everywhere. We're socialized to believe that events can't happen without alcohol. We see it at baby showers and at kids' sporting events and at large sporting events. I mean, it's everywhere. So, but I think that for me, one of the most beautiful things is not only do I get to enjoy the event, I get to remember it. And my true sparkle shines through better than I ever imagined it could. One of the most beautiful things that happened to me in the first couple of weeks of recovery is that all of my senses came back. I had no idea how I hadn't just been numbing my feelings, but all of my senses. So the sky was bluer, food tasted better. And so now I get to have these social experiences on a completely different level because I'm present.
Ooh, I love that. Talking about being present. And so I love how you looked at it because you're like, I'm not really giving something up. I've gained so much more. Michael, do you feel that? I hear you nodding your head. Were you, when you went in and you said, hey, I'm about to change my whole entire life by choosing to live this life, was that a fear for you?
Absolutely. So I got sober at 22, so I didn't really have a chance to access the bar scene or anything like that. So it was a big question that was on my mind. I was pretty fearful of how I would maintain sobriety and still have fun. And then what I quickly learned was not only was I able to have fun, life was actually more fun because it forced me to do things that I was actually interested in doing and actually interested in pursuing. So instead of Friday night going to the bar, I may take up a martial art, or I may go to an art class and just try different things. So then it gave me so many more experiences that I wouldn't have had if I had just done the classic keep drinking and keep doing your thing.
Wow, I love that. So it challenged you to say, what is fun? I think that's a big question because people think, like you said, that the association of going to the bar, that that's the only way to have fun, challenging you to think, are there other ways? So Nicole, I'm curious, for you, what was the biggest adjustment that you had to make in terms of your social life?
So it's kind of funny because it's everything, right? Was the biggest adjustment that we had to make. It's very cliche, but it's one of the cliches that rings true for everybody in their recovery process. The only thing you have to change is everything. So I had to change my social circles, but ultimately, I think that I love this question because my favorite response to how do you have fun in recovery is we do the exact same things that everybody else does. We just don't drink while we're doing it or use illegal substances. So it's a lot of the same activities that everybody does, what everybody considers fun, going boating. My favorite thing to do is go out on a lake and, be on a boat on a lake. And believe it or not, you can do that while maintaining sobriety if you're surrounded by the right people. So I guess adjustment wise, definitely adjusting my social circle.
Let's talk about that social circle before I go to Tyler with the next question. How much did you have to change? Because I think that people wonder, did everybody change in your life? And how did you even have that conversation? Was it like, hey, my life has changed? That is huge.
Yeah. So for me personally, what my story is, the people that I was surrounding myself with in my addiction, they just were not a part of my history. So as far as adjusting the people that I was associating with, it was more of just kind of creating a new community of people. And for me, in my story, that was in the rooms. I was a part of I still am a part of a 12-step community. So for me, it was about building up a new community of people. And ultimately, I found that conversations weren't really needed to have, because ultimately, when you start doing better and you start making better decisions in your life, you kind of see that people kind of just fall if they can't. It's kind of like you elevate yourself, and when people can't reach that point, they kind of just fall to the wayside. So obviously there's some people, we can't lose everybody in our lives all the time, right? Some of us have family members and even people who are like family that have stayed in our lives through it. And I think a lot of that is just having really healthy boundaries with people and maintaining those boundaries.
Yeah, I can only imagine. But that, I love that because like your 12-step community, you found other community that kind of crowded out, I would say, those other friends that you had that maybe weren't in the lifestyle that you were moving towards. So Tyler, people hear this. We're hearing Nicole. We've heard Michael. We heard Danielle. But from your perspective, what about that societal pressure? I know Nicole's saying, hey, we can still do the same things. We can still go the same places. But what is that societal pressure? Do you still feel that even to this day, even though you're years out? And how do you process that?
Yeah, great question. I don't think for me at this point, I have a lot of societal pressures. Early on, yeah, I questioned whether or not it would be okay to go to this wedding, right? Because typically I'm going to a wedding this weekend is why I bring that up for one of my cousins. But it's like, what if they realize I'm not drinking? Am I going to be able to have fun? Am I going to be able to enjoy myself? I think as far as the pressures go now, because I have such a good foundation in my recovery, that I have a good reason to be there. My cousin got sober a few years after me, and now I get to go and be a part of him growing, right? I get to go and be a part of him in his life, and kind of piggybacking off of the other question and kind of tying it all in, for me, for a long time, my drinking was because I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I self-medicated to make myself, feel okay with who I was. Right. And so part of my recovery was when I got here and I did some work on myself and I started building that recovery relationship with and community and stuff. I finally felt like I belonged. Right. And so now when I go to things like weddings or events or parties or whatever, obviously I have to have boundaries and check my motives. Why am I really going? Right. But ultimately, like, I get to be a part of today. And I think that's what I look forward to, because when at the end of my drinking, I was not invited to go out to places. People didn't want me around. Whereas now, I get to be invited, and that feels good because it reminds me that, like, how far I've come.
No, that's huge. And I want, by a show of hands, I know you all have been in recovery for a while. Does anyone feel pressure sometimes? Or does everyone do all of you feel like you're at a place where you're able to navigate that? Or even do you get uncomfortable questions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually think that it gets to a point, and like Tyler mentioned, when you're in such a solid foundation of your recovery, that the pressure almost seems to flip on the other people in your life. So for me, it's every time I do go out to a wedding or wherever it may be, and everybody's drinking, I always get the classic heart-to-heart moments where people come up to me and they're super proud and they're like, I wish I could stop drinking. And they kind of feel this pressure to tell me about what they're going through. So it seems like the first 6 months to a year when I was working on self and getting that foundation, I did feel some pressure, but it really does seem to flip around and reciprocate itself, that now my family kind of looks up to me and they kind of come to me with different problems that they may be having, and they feel pressure, like, why am I still doing this if he's happy without it and he's successful and active and all these things without it?
That's huge. So you're almost saying that people look at you as like they looking up to you. And when you're not drinking, it challenges other people to look at their drinking. Danielle, I see you want to say something on this.
It's like you read my mind, Joy. I think what's interesting, to Tyler's point, there's two parts to that. There is the idea that people are seeing what you're doing, and in the early stages, they shy away from you because you're a mirror to what they don't want to see, they don't want to acknowledge, they don't want any part of, because they don't want to stop. But now there's that tiptoeing into you and saying, okay, so you said something about alcohol not being self-care. Explain that to me. How are you looking at alcohol? How do you avoid it? How do you stay away from it? What were the first steps you took? How did you have to go to treatment? What did your mornings look like? How were you drinking? Because I did such a damn good job of hiding in plain sight what my alcoholism had turned into, that when I first came out and said, hey guys, I'm 6 months sober and I was really, really bad, people said, whoa, wait a minute, what? And I got a lot of, oh my gosh, that's my story too. So that was the reason I told the story to begin with, because I hoped that someone else would say, or someone else would be able to say, oh my gosh, I'm not alone, because I felt so alone. So now I get to have the conversations that Michael is having, where people say, how do I get started? Is there a way to get started? Are you really happy?
People ask you that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I see somebody want Tyler, because you're saying, oh, yeah. So people are asking. So you think people question your happiness now?
Not now, probably early on. Yeah, absolutely. People, and I think a lot of this conversation that we're having too about how, societal pressures and it's all about stigma, right? There's such a bad stigma about mental health, alcoholism, drug addiction. And so, like, yeah, when I first got sober and I would go out to eat with my friends and family, some of them didn't know that I had gotten sober at first. And so they're going around ordering drinks. Typically that's something I would do. And I would order a water, right? And you're not drinking. And I'm like, yeah, man, I don't drink anymore. And it shocked a lot of people. And so then they're turning around going, well, maybe I'm not going to drink either. And I'm like, I'm not an alien, man. I just don't drink anymore. You know what I mean?
You're like, I'm not an alien. I think that's a good phrase, because people wonder, and Nicole, I'm going to have you answer this, because people wonder, can they still drink around you? Because I'm sure, like in the early stages, people are like, okay, well, can I get my glass of wine? Or I'm not in recovery. One, you're a mirror. So they start thinking, well, is she going to think I have a problem? So what has that been like for you in terms of that fact?
So that is a wonderful question. So I personally believe that as a person in recovery, I cannot expect the world to adjust to my needs, right? That's where I feel like my terminal uniqueness set in to begin with, and how I ended up in treatment and, is because I felt like the world was supposed to revolve around me. So I'm a very firm believer in, we cannot expect the world to bend around us, because I cannot expect the world to bend around me. Because I am in recovery. I didn't experience the same thing as Tyler. My family was very well aware of my issues. So everybody knew, when I was going to treatment, everybody was involved in the process. So as far as my family went, that wasn't really an issue that I had. As far as having people drink around me, and it's something that comes up. It's, for me personally, like, I would never want anyone to feel uncomfortable drinking around me, but also, like, I don't want to be treated, as Tyler said, I use a different word, but I'm going to use his, like an alien. Just because I'm in recovery does not mean that it doesn't mean that you can't, be yourself around me or feel comfortable around me. And if you want to have a drink, you can have a drink. And my favorite thing to say is, and I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for saying this on a live thing, but I'm an addict. And so while alcohol was a huge part of my story, and I don't drink alcohol today because I am abstinent from all mood and mind altering substances. Now, if you had a pipe in front of me, that might be a different story. And so I probably shouldn't hang out with people who are doing that. But as far as alcohol goes, like, for me, this is something that you do and you can do, and that's fine. And so you don't have to feel uncomfortable around me. And I want to be included in things. And the last thing that I want to do is be excluded because you feel like you can't do these things around me. So.
Oh, that's so good. Okay, Danielle, I see you got to jump on in there, girl.
Hold on 1 second. I'm like, one of the things I wanted to say, I think because all of us feel as though we have a fairly strong foundation in our recovery, we can say we're comfortable, drink around us. I do think it's important to acknowledge, because I spend a lot of time talking to families who have someone who is new in recovery. It's important for those families and those individuals to have that conversation. Absolutely. When I was brand new, I was incredibly grateful that people asked, or that my family said, hey, do you want to go to a Cardinals game? And gave me the grace to say, actually, I don't. I'm not ready to go surround myself with thousands of people who are drinking right now. Even now, I will go to events where people are drinking, but if I end up in an arena where everybody is sloppy, I will excuse myself, because I will reach a point where extreme drunkenness hits its boundary for me. And I think, okay, I'm done with this, and I will leave. And the people in my life respect that. So I think it's, I had that conversation. I had 2 parents ask me last night, should we remove all of the alcohol from the house for when she comes home from treatment? And I said, this is a really good conversation. If the alcohol that you are drinking is her alcohol of choice, it would likely be a safe zone for her not to have it there initially, until she reaches a point where she can say to you, I have no problem, I'm fine, please go ahead. Just out of respect, because and it's not that we want to control anyone else, but sometimes there is that comfort level. And when we love other people who are struggling, we want to support them some.
Mm-hmm. I think that's good. And one of the things I want to ask is, what has been, and you guys can address this, one of the weirdest or unusual, or some of the questions you get? Michael, is there anything that comes to your mind that people ask you, or questions that are common?
In terms of questions that are common, I think it's just the basic ones that I'm sure we all hear. How long do you have? What made you want to get sober? How's your relationship with your family? And I think that I'd love to go back to the question before this as well. I think that's a perfect example of why even treatment has to be so individualized, because we all have such different lens on everything. I know for me, when I first got sober, it took me a lot of different attempts. And one of the things that was important to me was I'm not going to get sober if I'm not going to be able to go to the Cardinals games, and I'm not going to be able to hang out with my family while they're drinking. I come from an Irish family, so Lord knows I'm the only sober one there. But for me, it was just super important that I could live my life exactly how I wanted to, and not put that pressure that, like Nicole said, this is my thing to deal with. This is what I have. It's not your burden. So you go live your life. But yeah, the questions, I mean, they range, but there hasn't been any one question that's been super crazy for me yet. No.
Well, now I'm about to give you a crazy question. Okay. I'm about to dig in deep. We're going to talk about dating in recovery.
Love it.
So we're going to transition this conversation because we talked about the sober. I think you guys hit on some really good things about social, but let's take it to the next level of dating. First of all, is everybody, I don't know everybody's situation. So anybody married, I don't want to get anybody in trouble first. Anybody married? No. So talk to me, Tyler, because I know I could see you were burning to say some stuff, but talk to me about dating in recovery. Do you tell people, first of all, that you're in recovery? And how do you navigate that? Because I think that's another fear that people think about, like, do I have to tell everybody? Do I have to wear this sign that says, hey, I'm in recovery?
That's funny you ask, because I had that exact situation happen to me, and I'm engaged now. But when I started dating first with early recovery, right? I'm living in a halfway house. I didn't have a driver's license. I'm flipping burgers for minimum wage and didn't really have much to offer, but I was sober. So I wanted to get out there and, I wanted to make money. I wanted to get involved in relationships. I wanted to meet women, because it's something, a lot of the insecurities that I drank over for a long time prevented me from being able to do that. And so once I got sober and I started to love myself a little, I wanted to put myself out there. And it's funny because when I met my fiance now, we started talking and I met her online dating, right? I met her on Tinder.
Okay, Tinder, shout out. No.
Yeah.
It works.
But it's funny because I reached out to my spiritual mentor, right? I reached out to my sponsor in recovery and I let him know that I was looking at dating, and I'm like, do I need to tell her that? And he's like, no, you don't have to go out there and start a conversation off when you just met this girl and wave the I'm an alcoholic flag, He said, just be normal, get to know her, start out as friends. And of course, my alcoholic mind, right? Like I'm already projecting what's her last name look like with mine? Would we be compatible? What do our kids look like? Instead of just keeping things simple and like getting to know her, right?
At what point did you tell her?
So that's the funny part is, so she invited me to a bar. And all her friends were going specifically to turn up, right? So now I'm like texting my sponsor, like, okay, dude, now she's inviting me to a bar. And he's like, yeah, time to tell her. So I let her know, like, hey, there's something you should know. I'm in recovery and I don't drink. And I was reluctant to tell her in fear of, I wouldn't be able to hang with her, right? And she was like, well, I already know. She saw my social media platform. I'm very open and loud about my recovery. And it didn't faze her at all. And so we were able to, and now here it is 3 years later, we're engaged, we have a child together and things. So
what month was that? How far were you in when you had that conversation? Were you
I was actually several years sober I
mean, in terms of telling her, what point were you in your relationship?
Oh, it was a few weeks because she, we wanted to meet, right? So she was out with her friends and she was like, well, why don't you come hang out with us? And I was like, oh, I would love to, but I don't think going to Silverados is the right environment for me.
I think that's huge. I love that transparency. So I'm going to take it over to Nicole. Nicole, what is your stance? I don't know if you've done online dating, but are you open and upfront, or are you someone who says, I kind of wait till the person gets to know me? I'm curious your stance on that.
Yeah. So I think like other situations, it's deeply personal, right? It's about like when you feel comfortable. For me, I am like very vocal about it just because one of my deal breakers is marijuana. And as we know, with marijuana being more legalized and more socially acceptable, I kind of have to have those conversations up front, because the last thing I want to do is catch feelings for somebody and then find out that they have, you know, this relationship with a substance that I can't really put myself in that situation and be around. So for me, I'm very upfront and forward about it. Not to mention, like Tyler said, like, it's very common. They're like, you want to go grab a drink? You know, we're all a little bit older now, you know? So that's like one of the first questions that's asked. And it's like, actually, I don't drink. And for me, obviously, why don't you drink? Because as a society, we can't just accept that people don't drink. That question usually follows. But I also, like Tyler, am very loud and very proud of my recovery. I joke all the time that I scream it from the rooftops. Everybody around me knows that you don't have to protect my anonymity for nothing. If you know somebody that's struggling and my story will help them, share it, do whatever you need to do. So again, I think it really does depend on the person and their comfortability level, because again, there is a stigma that's associated with it as well. So it gets hard for people. Sorry. The noise just went off and I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, I'm not really sure where that came from, but I thought what you said was really good. And Danielle, I want to ask you this: how much do you think you should share? Because do you feel like if you're in a dating relationship and, you know, you're just kind of getting to know someone and you do reveal that you're in sobriety, do you need to tell them your whole journey? Do you need to set boundaries in that and protecting yourself to some extent? What has been your experience?
See, that's so interesting that you ask that, because I continued to ask myself that very same question. I have found that I can be an open book with other people in recovery. I have found that I am more hesitant with people who are not, because there appears to be, my experience has been, there's less judgment among the recovery crowd, because they have been there, done that. They understand. They have spent time with other people like us. So I tried a little bit of online dating, and I remember guys suggested meeting in a bar, and I went and I ordered club soda, and he looked at me sideways immediately. And I said, I don't drink. And he said, my grandfather said, never trust anybody who doesn't drink. And I said, well, I don't really know what to tell you about that. So, and then I explained, and he was fascinated by the fact that I actually had a story and a reason and a why. So every time we talked after that, he wanted a little bit more of the story, which I have I believe a compelling reason for why I don't drink. I mean, there's a reason. It's not just like I woke up one day and thought, you know, it's not good for me anymore. So I turned it into a job. I mean, I changed careers specifically because I was so lost and alone that I wanted to be able to do the best I could to help other people from feeling that way. So I think that sharing, like everyone else on the panel, I'm extremely open about it. I'm not at all vaguely concerned about my anonymity, and largely because the stigma that comes with it is one of the things that kept me from seeking help for so long. I was so truly terrified of the repercussions that would come with raising my hand and saying, wait, I'm a what? I've got to wear this scarlet A for the rest of my life. There's something I can't do. And I couldn't help myself. And that was heartbreaking for me. So being able to share it and hope that maybe it helps someone else is the way I want to do it. And if it means I tell it on a date, I tell it on a date. But I have found that I am more open with people in recovery.
Now, this is an interesting question, and I love as we're talking about this, Michael, you might have some insight on this. When you first kind of were getting sober, did you only kind of think about dating other people in recovery? Or what are your stances on that? Because I always want, you know, that's a question that people may have. Well, okay, if I'm going to date, then I have to find somebody in recovery, or should I be open early on? Was that a challenge that you dealt with?
I'll tell you this, I'm probably pretty backwards to most people. I actually won't date somebody if they're in recovery. So I front load everything. I let you know, conversation number one, who I am, what I do, what I used to do. Because the way I look at it is that's who I am. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for 3 months and then tell you, and then you have a problem with it. And I'm not going to put on a mask. So I would just front load it to whoever. And I found that it put me in with the right people that I wanted to be with, people that loved me and cared for me and didn't pass any judgment on me. Because if you air everything out within the first date, say for example, and they don't like it, then I didn't waste any time and we just wouldn't be compatible anyways. But if I get it all out there and you're still here with me, then great. Now we can get to know each other and we can take it from here. But I didn't want to date somebody that was in recovery because again, I'm backwards with it. I do things pretty uniquely. And I didn't want somebody that was always tied up and always kind of running me around the recovery gambit. I feel like we do it for work. I think about it so much in my own brain and do so much for it on my own time that it's almost kind of like you don't want to work in your bedroom, right? I want it to be able to come home and kick my feet up and maybe have something other to talk about other than my sobriety or her sobriety or whatever it may be.
Okay, by a show of hands, who agrees? Who feels the same way about dating someone in recovery? Does anybody else agree with that?
Or I told you it's backwards.
Okay, I see. Wait, Nicole says I feel that.
I don't have a rule.
Okay, you don't have a rule. Okay.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think that I have a rule, but I definitely prefer not to date someone in recovery. Not for those reasons. I mean, I've been with American Addiction Centers for almost 9 years now. So this is definitely, it's not just who I am, it's what I do, it's my career, it's everything. But it's more about, for me, kind of like a little bit what Michael said, like I already am taking my own inventory. Like I don't need somebody else taking my inventory as well. And I think that because we're so open and transparent, it's very hard to like be in relationship with someone who is exactly like that as well. It's just heavy. I've done it in the past. But I also kind of like where he said, you don't want to work in your bed. It's the same thing, like running in recovery circles. When things go bad, sometimes it can be really difficult. And I did have that experience, you know, when I was young in recovery, and I mean, young in years in recovery. And so that's kind of what my reasoning behind it is too. And then of course, if you're of the belief that this disease is genetic, I also would like my kids to have half a chance.
That's a good point. I never thought about that. I know, Tyler, I see you're chomping at the bit. You got something to say on this because you're engaged. So we know you have the greatest insight in this area.
Yes. So, I just want to point out too, like a lot of us drank different drinks, right? Some drank gin, some are pounding 211 still reserve, right? So our recovery is all going to look different too. Alcohol is right, but a symptom. When I first got sober, I had to learn how to do things all over again. I felt like when I first started dating that it was my first date again, or it was my first kiss again, or it was my first, whatever. It was like I get to do this with a fresh start. And I also believe that recovery is all about growth. Right. So I quit drinking and now it's time to find who I am. And I believe that recovery, and this is just my belief, is all about relationships with a higher power of some sort, whatever that looks like to you. And then I start to rebuild a relationship with myself so that I can give myself to other people, whether that be the dating scene or friendships or whatever. So it's all about growth. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way, whether it's backwards like Michael or if it's, my sponsor told me to do this, or whatever the case may be. I think it's all about finding out who you are. You might find out that the women or the men that you were attracted to when you were drinking is not the same case when you're sober.
That's
and
interesting.
So it's all about growth and change and being open to grow in my recovery as a person and build relationships.
Well, Tyler, you were reading my mind as we go into this final section of what I want to talk about. It's self-love in recovery. You kind of start touching on it. Like I had to start to love myself, and how I loved myself impacted how I loved others. And even the taste in people, or not taste, I guess that may sound a little odd, but even the type of, people I wanted to date may change because of that. So Danielle, I'm going to start with you on this one. How did you have to repair the relationship with yourself? I know we think about the relationship with others, when you're in that recovery and forgiveness, but tell me about the relationship with you.
Well, the first thing I had to do was recognize that the person I had been lying to the very most was me.
Mhm.
I the bottom that I hit, my personal bottom, was recognizing that I didn't want to live like that anymore. And I have found that there is a very thin line between I don't want to live and I don't want to live like this.
Mm.
And I walked right up to that line and was having a very hard time looking myself in the mirror. I had gone from being so truly honest, holding it as a core principle in life, to being someone who could look you straight in the eye and lie like it was my job.
Mm.
And I remember very clearly the moment that I was in the guest bathroom in my house and drinking a warm, slamming a warm glass of leftover wine in a red Solo cup just to get something into me, and I gagged. And I thought, who are you? So getting to know her and
Mm.
then understanding that being beautifully broken is okay, and putting those pieces back together and allowing the light to continue to shine through, all those little bits. It's been remarkable to get to know myself again. It's been
Mm.
remarkable to understand that one of the biggest pieces of recovery to me is finding a way to help other people, because I was so truly lost and I didn't know there were other people like me. I didn't know other people blacked out, not pass out, blackout. I was a professional blackout drinker, often on airplanes, in and out of Ubers. I mean, I didn't know who I was. And so
Mm.
self-love started with figuring out who I was and getting to know her again. And then bit by bit, introducing her, reintroducing her
Wow.
to her kids, and being grateful for every piece of that journey.
Well, Danielle, first of all, your transparency and just sharing that. I don't know if the audience felt that, but I felt that. I truly felt that because, having to learn to love yourself again and reintroducing this person, this new you, how recovery had given you this part. I think that's so, so powerful. And I'm curious, did anybody else feel like they had to learn themselves again? Did anybody, by a show of hands, did anybody else feel that way?
I did. I felt like it's not necessarily that I had to learn myself again. I just had to be real life honest with myself. I know when I was 22 and walking into detox, I know for sure that I was a coward, and I know that I was a little boy and I was scared of so many things, and I was a liar and a cheat and all those. And I knew that deep down, but it wasn't until I finally actually just accepted it and told myself out loud, like, dude, you're a coward. You need to figure this thing out. So it wasn't as much as learning myself as it was of finally just admitting to myself who I am in my core, and then moving forward from that point. And I always say to people that I'm talking to, if you loved yourself the way that I love me, you wouldn't stress about most of the things that people stress about, or get down on yourself. And I feel like self-love is the most important thing, and self-belief is the most important thing. So building that foundation, like Danielle said, and getting to introduce that to other people. And that's where, to me, the real light is. It's not necessarily in my sobriety. It's in the fact that I've learned to love myself and believe in myself more than anybody else in the world, and not from an arrogant place, but from a genuine, truly I love myself place. And then that light and operating from that place gives so many people in your life exactly what they need, whatever that may be, even if it's just them being honest with themselves the way that I had to be.
Well, let's give people, as we kind of wrap up this conversation, let's give people some insight. How do I begin to love myself? What does that even look like? I mean, one, I'm sure it has to do with being real with yourself, but curious, Nicole, do you have any insight on how did you start that journey for yourself of rebuilding the relationship with yourself? Of course, you went through treatment, but what were some of the things that you did to rebuild that relationship?
Yeah. I went through treatment, and I also worked a program. I'm a big advocate for recovery. I'm an even bigger advocate for treatment. And just the reason is because I didn't even know how to like be, let alone repair a relationship with myself. So I had to go and learn real basic stuff like when to make my bed and how to be accountable to showing up to groups on time and stuff like that. And I think that once I started to do those things, how I started to rebuild my relationship with myself was being accountable to those things.
That's huge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, was being accountable to showing up to the 12-step communities and taking commitments and doing those things and having a sponsor and working the steps and giving back what was so freely given to us, working a program of recovery. And I know that looks different for everyone. Obviously, I promote 12-step communities because that's what saved my life, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's everyone's path, and that's okay. I, like Tyler, believe that recovery is constantly working on yourself. And that's how I repair my relationship with myself is I'm constantly working on improving myself. And I fail sometimes. I am not perfect. Everybody knows that. None of us are. But I think the biggest thing for me too is having really solid people in my corner that will help hold me accountable as well, and who will build me up and who will call me out. And I think that's what helped a lot too, and understanding that I was worthy of a relationship with myself.
Ooh, that's so good. So I want to pause here and just see if we have any questions. We're going to allow people to drop their questions in the chat. If you have any questions for our panelists, and Tyler, as we're waiting to see if we do have any questions from our audience, tell me 2 or 3 things that you do to practice self-love every day now, or something you do that's an act of self-love at this point in your recovery.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, I'll narrow it down to one big one, I think, and how to live a full life of recovery, right, is the theme for today. And just tell a quick short story is when I first got sober, I got out of treatment, went to a sober living house, and the head of the house, or the owner of the house, every Friday you had to be at work or dead, or you couldn't miss the house meeting. And he would sit there for 3 hours, and he was this senile old man, and he would tell all these stories, and you're just like pulling your hair out. And after a couple of years ago, he got real sick, and a bunch of us that got sober together, is about 5 or 6 of us. We wanted desperately to go and have that hour-long meeting. And so we went and we did that. And it wasn't, but about a year later, he got real sick and wound up in the hospital, and we found out he wasn't going to make it. So we went and saw him at the hospital. And for somebody who was, dying of cancer, he was very happy. He was smiling. And of course, we're snot-nosed crying. And I remember saying to him, like, BJ, you don't have to be humble right now. Like, it's okay to be sad. And he looked at me, and with this big cheesy, you could see his cavities. He was smiling so big. And he was like, he was sober 20 some odd years, but he said the last 20 whatever years he was sober was all overtime, because he should have died before he got to recovery. And he said, I've lived a good life, and you guys can live a good life too if you just don't stop helping people. And so I think for me, the best way that I can practice self-love is to be out of myself and be of service to others. I have found that when I am being of service to others, my life is really daggone good today.
Wow. That was a powerful story. Thank you for sharing that, Tyler. And I just we do have a question here. Have any of you struggled with finding where you fit in the recovery world after a move? Who wants to take that? Nicole's moved a lot. So Nicole, I know Nicole's story. She been in New York. She's in Kentucky. She's been in Tennessee. She's from California. So if you could address that question. Thank you, Jamie, for that.
Yes, that is an excellent question. And the answer is, oh man, did I struggle. I originally am from California. I got clean in San Diego. And I was a part of the 12-step community there in San Diego. And then I had the opportunity to work for this really cool company in Tennessee. And I took the offer and I moved. and I didn't know anybody. And I was in a place of resentment, and just super irritated that I had to essentially start over. I felt like I already did this. I already started this from the ground up. I'm clean. I'm sober. I'm doing this. Like, why do I have to start over? And ultimately, I just talked about it a minute ago, but the people that you surround yourself with is so important. I worked in this industry, and one of the women that I got close to working here literally dragged me into a meeting. And from there, I was able to build another recovery community. And it's hard and it's uncomfortable, but I think what's harder and what's more uncomfortable is knowing where I could be if I don't get out there and start to rebuild that recovery community.
Is there any tips you would give for rebuilding that recovery community? I mean, you did have somewhat, I mean, you're working for American Addiction Centers, so you're around people. We have a lot of employees who are in recovery, but for somebody who may not be working in the industry, do you have any tips that they could utilize to rebuild those or refine those new connections?
Yeah, definitely. I think ultimately, the biggest thing is if you're a part of a 12-step community, like, drag yourself to those meetings. It's uncomfortable and it's hard to sit there and raise your hand and say you're a first timer. But in my experience, you say you're a first timer and you're going to have you're not going to be able to get away from the people who are going to want to bring you in and bring you into the fold. And if you don't experience that at one meeting, then go to another one. So ultimately just kind of like remembering that you have to get yourself up and out there. I think another thing too, that we can kind of touch on, I know it's the end of it, but I also moved from Tennessee to New York. And then 6 weeks later, the pandemic hit. So for me, that was a very hard, and I think about it all the time. I think about people who were just starting to begin their recovery journey in the pandemic. And I still can't quite like wrap my head around having to do that because, it's impounded into our heads in recovery. Stay in the middle of the circle, get in the middle of the herd, and surround yourself with winners, all of those things. And then all of a sudden we quite literally couldn't do that anymore. So that was really difficult too. And putting myself out there and having to attend like online things and kind of reach out to your network of people. I think one of the coolest things that I experienced was, again, it was somebody that worked here, but it could be anybody really. I celebrated 5 years, and this was 5 years ago. And someone reached out to his network that was like from all over the country. And I had people that were reaching out to me to wish me a happy 5 years. We're all connected. Like, we are all connected. So reach out to your existing recovery community and see who they know in different places. We have conferences all over the world. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody that's in recovery. So rely on the people that you surround yourself with.
Oh, I think those are some really, really good tips. Let's see if we have any other questions before we get to our final piece of advice that I'd love for you all to each give. As we round out, this has been such a great conversation. But if you could give, we're talking about sober and social and a full life in recovery. I want each of you to give one piece of advice that you wish maybe somebody had given to you or that you've heard along your journey about this full life in recovery. And Michael, I'm going to start with you.
If I had to narrow it down to one thing, something that I already touched on, I think it would just be to truly be fully disturbingly honest with yourself and who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly, and always keep yourself in the moment. And then nothing really sways you too much one way or the other. Never too excited, never too down. But just being fully honest with yourself. You can lie to others if that's your thing, whatever, and people won't like that I said that, but you really need to be disturbingly honest with yourself.
I love that. Disturbingly honest with yourself. Okay, Danielle, your final piece of words of wisdom.
Connect and be of service. The two things that matter the most to me are making sure I stay connected, both for myself and for others, and finding a way to give. In early recovery, if I found myself getting in my head, I would instantly text other people to say, hey, checking in, how are you doing? And then I found the second they reached back out and told me how they were doing, then I was lost in that. So rather than getting stuck in how I felt, I was suddenly stuck in how they were doing. And it turned out to be a beautiful gift. And that was the beginning of me saying, okay, I'm focusing over there. And I would be lost without the community that is the other people that are beautifully broken the same way I am. That's what's so amazing is I can walk into a room full of other people who have struggled the way I have and have absolutely nothing in common with them on a surface level, and yet have absolutely everything in common with them on a heart level. And that means I've got family everywhere.
Oh, I love that. And as before I go to Tyler and Nicole for that, we do have an online community, American Addiction Centers. You don't have to have gone to any of our treatment centers. If you look for us online, there is a support community. There's a community in there. They encourage each other. They support each other. And if you're one of our alumni, we actually have an alumni app where we've created a community where you can get instantly connected to people all over the country who've attended one of our facilities. So please keep that in mind. If you're somebody out there who says, I need to connect somehow, that could be a great first step, in terms of an online connection. So Tyler, your final piece of wisdom.
Final piece. I guess two things. The first is give yourself some grace, right? You walk 10 miles into the woods. It's going to take 10 miles to walk out. Time takes time. It's going to take a lot of work. And which brings me to the best advice that I could give for somebody is I think a lot of people, you'll hear it in the room. So you have to want this thing. You have to want it. I don't agree with that. I think there are people who want and need to get sober every day and they die before they get here. I think it's for people who do it. If you get to that point where you need help, hit the ground running, let the feet do the work, let your head catch up later. Do the things that people who you look up to, that are sober, that are living full lives in recovery and that are happy, do what they did. And then your head, your heart, all that stuff will fall into place later on.
Ooh, that's so good, Tyler. Don't wait till you always feel like it. Just start the path and let your mind, your heart, and all of that catch up. So good. So good. So Nicole.
I don't know if I can talk that one, Joy.
I know you have a golden nugget for us. I know just that final golden nugget, because you are the person in the room with the longest, or in our panel today, with the longest sobriety date. We're 10 years. 10 years plus. So what is your final golden nugget?
I think just like piggybacking off of everybody, honestly, I would say probably for me, I'd have to agree with Danielle, like community connection. Like I would not be who and where I am today if it weren't for the people that I surrounded myself with. I couldn't do it alone. I can't do it alone.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Some great advice. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, whether you're watching this on the replay. Thank you to my panel for being a part of this during Alcohol Awareness Month. We hope that your life has been touched and changed. And if you're someone who needs help, that you'll see the number on your screen, that you'll reach out to someone to get help. And that's going to do it for our final episode of Sober Thursdays.